Okay, well, hello, Dr. Todd. It is such an honor. I'm so happy to have you back on the show. Once again, our last interview was so much fun, and you are such a wealth of information.
Thank you. The only problem with the last interview is it ended. It was such a good, such a good time.
So
I always
much
about
fun.
things that we're having a good time doing. So it was great. Such a pleasure.
So much fun. Yes, I loved it. And for those of you who are listening, if you missed our last interview, you can go back to episodes 23 and 24 and catch it. So, Dr. Todd, you founded Shape roughly around 12 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be 13 years this March. So it's
Okay, wonderful.
it's now a teenager. So I don't know what to expect.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Absolutely. Yeah.
And you founded it originally as a weight loss program, but you quickly discovered the whole health, the whole
Yeah.
body benefits of following an anti-inflammatory lifestyle,
Yeah.
really.
It was built as a weight loss program because my wife gained some weight with menopause and kind of lost her. I'll leave it. I'll leave that what she lost to the ethers. But I never liked weight loss programs. I always thought they were seedy and just wrong. And now it's my wife, and so I built Shape on two premises. One, all diets fail because they do. And number two, it can't be just metabolic. It's got to be something different. So when with my study and what I went through and trying to understand why all diets failed, I came to the conclusion it had to do with the brain and the brain getting a message that it's starving. And so I built this program with the idea the missing link was the brain. And it just became amazing because even though it started as weight loss, all of a sudden it became an anti-inflammatory program. It strengthened the immune system. It was a mild detox with a side effect of weight loss. It was such an exciting thing to see that transformation of something I had disdain for, weight loss programs, to something that became a national company. So I say it's a God thing. I love it. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. It has changed countless lives and it's continuing to change countless lives. And it truly is an incredible mind, body, soul, spirit benefit. Wouldn't you agree to that?
It is absolutely, absolutely, and they have to be blended. We can't separate them. That's a problem with medicine. We separate stuff.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Conventional medicine looks at the pain point, right? You're having
Right.
headaches. Let's look at your brain, your head, your brain, what's going on there, and let's not look at nutrition. Let's not look at your gut, you know.
Yeah. I had a paradigm shift. We're taught as physicians. I was taught as a physician to ask what's wrong, but you and I both know you have people come to clients. My case, patients came to me. I knew something was wrong. They knew something was wrong, and yet every test was textbook midline normal. And it isn't a lack of Prozac, I mean, that isn't the answer to this problem. So I had this paradigm shift and began to look at asking what's not right instead of asking what's wrong. And I came to the conclusion you got to be 2/3 sick before medicine sees what's wrong. And that opened up this amazing door of possibilities for all of my patients. And that one single thought made me a profoundly better doctor. It was quite exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. You are absolutely right too about that comment about you have to be 2/3 sick before anybody recognizes in
Right.
conventional medicine that something is wrong.
Mhm.
And I love that. Ask like what's not right instead of what's wrong. And I think the latest statistic shows that maybe only 12% of Americans are metabolically healthy, something around there.
Yep.
And really,
That. Yep.
yeah, okay. And so with so many serious medical conditions that we have around us, like diabetes, for example, diabetes is on the rise at an
Absolutely.
alarming rate. Can you explain even just explain how serious inflammation can be to the body as a whole?
Yeah, and I think it's a buzzword in medicine right now. It's the new kid on the block. Everybody's into uh, inflammation, and I get that. But the first thing you have to understand is it's a proper thing. I mean, inflammation it removes damaged cells. It literally eliminates toxins. It fights any kind of invading microorganisms, and it begins the repairing process. So inflammation is not bad. It's when it gets out of control that it becomes bad. And that's what our standard American diet, SAD, which is such an interesting
Yes.
first letters, it's created a pro-inflammatory condition, and now we get this cascade of inflammation. And big pharma has forever gone after things to try to help inflammation. Started with aspirin, back in the 30s, and to today with what they're trying to do. And I get that, but again, they're that mentality of let's fix what's screaming instead of asking why is it screaming. We need to understand the process behind that. So looking at inflammation in a more open way, and there's a bunch of technical terms, and I'm not going to get into NF-kappa B and prostaglandins and that kind of stuff because it's not something the audience wants to hear. But there's a process, and it's not an automatic process. And this is the interesting thing. This is a very well orchestrated thing. And I'm gonna talk. One of my passions in teaching is to take very difficult things and make the public understand. So there's an entity called inflammasomes. Pretty much nobody's ever heard of these things. But what happens is we have cells that are involved in inflammation that build these things called inflammasomes. They're quickly built and quickly disassembled. It's in the cellular activity, and they have to be the inflammatory process that has to be triggered. And there's something that has to send a message to signal it's time for inflammation. And I put these into two categories. We have what I call stranger signals, and we have danger signals. Now, the stranger signals that trigger the onset of an inflammatory cascade. The stranger things are like intestinal parasites, viruses, bacteria, fungal infections. They're strangers to our body, and they signal this inflammatory response. And then there's the danger signals. And of course, these are like an injury. You fall off your motorcycle and get all scraped up. You want inflammation to occur because otherwise you're going to die. You're going to bleed to death from not being able to respond from an inflammatory standpoint. And then there are proteins involved in these dangers, and these are the beta amyloids. And this is where it gets into Alzheimer's. These are the things that they're tying to all these brain degenerative entities, these toxic proteins, these beta amyloids. There's also in the danger category the crystal depositions. This is the uric acid buildup, gout, basically, and we get this inflammatory. Anybody's ever had gout? I had a number of episodes of gout. Don't know what that's all about. I don't like it, but man, it is really painful. And you'll take anything to get out of this pain. It's so violent. That's why medicine is always going after that. But then the last danger signal is diet, and it starts with overnutrition. This country is overfed and undernourished. It's that simple. We are given foods that fill our gut but don't trigger a satiety mechanism. It's these diet foods. Obesity, you can take the increase in the use of diet foods, things with artificial sugars, and obesity, and the lines go identical. They parallel up. We're eating foods that aren't supposed to cause us gain weight, and yet we're getting more and more obese. 30% of this nation is obese, morbidly obese. We're not talking obese, we're talking morbidly obese, which is, 50 to 75 pounds over where they should be. So it's overnutrition. It's of course, the diabetes is part of it. From an inflammation standpoint, they're calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes because one of the major functions of insulin is to keep glucose out of the brain, because glucose is a neurotoxin. What is the number one cause of blindness in America today? It's diabetes, right? Because the high blood sugar in the brain destroys that sensitive nerve tissue. Well, if it destroys your eyes, do you think it could destroy anything else in the brain? Well, of course it can. And so it's an interesting thing. Trans fats are another one. From a dietary standpoint, they are so pro-inflammatory, and these are man-made things. And it makes me crazy when meat gets slammed that it's bad, it's inflammatory. No, it's not if you eat it correctly and don't combine it with certain things. I mean, God put certain things on earth to eat. When people ask me what should I eat, I have a classic line. I said, eat only things that can spoil and rot, and eat them before they do. That's the simple thing, you know. When you have a Hostess Twinkie that's 7 years old and it's still squishy and yellow, and the cellophane is breaking down, we got a problem, you know.
Right.
That's not probably a healthy thing to put into your body because it's 7 years old and it's still yellow and squishy and there's no mold on it. How can that be? If you had an apple at 7 years old, well, it'd be decomposed, it'd be gone. That's good. It can spoil or not. Eat it before it does. The other one is something I refer to as food shock. This is where we get into the food sensitivities. You know, I'm hitting my seventh inning stretch here in my life. I'm about to turn 70, which is strange because I just never saw that coming. But you know, nobody had food sensitivities when I was a kid. Nobody had gluten sensitivities. None of this stuff exists. Once in a while, you hear about some kid in a bubble in New York or whatever, but what's going on? Well, it all starts with this inflammatory reaction that creates now an issue with your adrenal glands. Now your adrenals don't react; they overreact. That's a histamine response, and all of a sudden we have this cascade of symptoms that are all triggered by an inflammatory reaction from food shock, eating foods that aren't correct for us. We react to things, and it's always the protein in food that we're reacting to. Gliadin is the protein in wheat, and that's the thing you can measure: gliadin antibodies and all that kind of stuff. So, that was a long answer for a short question, wasn't it?
No, I love it. And you're right. I really am so glad you brought up how Alzheimer's is now being called type 3 diabetes, because that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Because inflammation and how it affects our brain, it's not really talked about as much, right? As much as it should be, often until it's too late. Or at least that's what the conventional medical model has us understand.
They're spending all their energy on making a drug to help it. Well, this is not a deficiency entity when it comes to medications. You know, depression is not a deficiency in Prozac or Effexor. You know, there's a lot involved in brain chemistry with this thing, and that's why I built Shape with the idea it's a problem with the brain. And you know, back to this inflammasome, which again no one's ever heard of, but the purpose of these inflammasomes is to build what are called cytokines, and these cytokines are supposed to be there. Again, this is how the body responds to it. But if they get out of control, and this is your interleukins and all this kind of stuff that goes on, what happens? It gets out of control is obesity, insulin resistance, fatty liver. Non-alcoholic fatty liver is the number one liver disease in children. Non-alcoholic fatty liver. Does anybody ask why that happened? Gout, obviously. No. Alzheimer's, autoimmune. I mean, I saw when I started in practice 40 plus years ago, I saw Hashimoto's thyroiditis, autoimmune thyroid condition, maybe twice a year. At the end of my career, every other thyroid patient was a Hashimoto's thyroiditis. So an inflammation of the thyroid, an autoimmune, your body's attacking itself. Why? Somebody's got to step back and ask the why question. It's stuff we've done to our environment, to our food chain, what we're trying to do to our immune system by enhancing it with vaccines. Oh, did I dare say that word? You know, in this culture today, you know, it saddens me to realize how foolish we've become and weakened our immune system through an attempt to help it. And there's a lot of data to support. You can't find it because it's squashed, but the overuse of vaccines has created the epidemic in autoimmune conditions.
Yeah,
body's attacking itself.
Absolutely. Well, there's a reason why we have over 100 autoimmune conditions now.
Yeah, it's unreal. And again, I saw 2 a year in 1981, in the 80s, and at the end, and I was very thorough, and way before it became popular to be thorough in investigating thyroid function. Some of the tests didn't even exist. Thyroid peroxidase, thyroid antibodies, reverse T3. These tests didn't even exist when I started in practice. And as we evolved in our trying to understand, we developed a better understanding of what needed to be done.
Well, I really want to take a second, excuse me, to talk about the Alzheimer's, the dementia conversation, right, because it's really very near and dear to my heart. We lost my mother-in-law to Alzheimer's at a very, very young age. And I know that you talk about hope. There's so much hope that you share. And I'm a big believer in sharing hope as well, because, there's always hope. There's always so much we can do to help support our body and our brain. It's not our lot in life to be struggling the way so many people are, and it's just getting worse. So would you just take a few minutes and just give some encouragement to our listeners that may be struggling with their memory, or any kind of struggle that they're having with brain fog or cognitive decline?
Sadly, I think more people have died from the word cancer than have ever died from the disease. Because when that word is spoken into someone's life, they put an equal sign between cancer and death. And Alzheimer's is really, truly scarier than cancer, because the end result of cancer is you're going to die. The problem with Alzheimer's is you're going to be alive, but you don't even have, you're not aware of the fact that you are who you are. And it's a horrible, horrible condition. But again, let's step back and ask, what happened that allowed that to happen? I remember years ago that people would say, well, eat fish because it's good for your brain. Okay. And we all heard it. And then one day I thought, why is that? Why was that statement out there? So I took off with research, and it has to do with essential fatty acids. And so we're all told we got to eat fish oil. It's really good for your heart. Well, in fish oil, there's something called EPA, and that's very cardioprotective. But fish oil also has something called DHA, which is very cognitively protective. So when we get in a situation where there's any decline, get on a higher DHA fish oil, because the DHA supports brain health. There's also neurotoxins that exist, and this whole toxic situation, inflammation and toxicity are so intertwined you can't separate them. And the neurotoxins that exist, aspartame being one, artificial sweetener, it's a neurotoxin. The amount, just research on the internet, the number of people that are absolutely normal, and all of a sudden they start drinking diets. They drink a Diet Coke in the morning, at lunch, before bed, during the day, and all of a sudden they have cognitive issues. Look at the history of aspartame and how it came. There's a book called The 100-Year Lie, I think by a guy named Fitzgerald, and he kind of talks about this increase in the amount of toxins that have been put into our environment, and when you will get angry, violently angry, when you realize what happened in the FDA when GD Searle was the company that invented aspartame, and it was known to be a neurotoxin. It caused brain cancer, all kinds of different things. Known fact. So then the head of the FDA at the time allowed it in a certain area. I believe the guy's name was Hull. I could be wrong, but the book 100-Year Lie talks about this thing. And he got it in certain situations, but it just opened the door and the floodgates opened up, and now it's in everything. And so this Arthur Hull Hayes was his name. That's the guy's name. It just came to me.
Okay.
He ended up working for GD Searle after he left the FDA. Just, how many Faucis do we have to have before somebody goes, no, it's time to stop this. It makes me absolutely insane. So the neurotoxic aspect combined with inflammation and immunosuppression, and then dysglycemia, you put those together, and it equals brain degeneration. And that doesn't even get into the emotional component of this thing. If I ever wrote another book, which I'm not going to do, but if I did, the book would be, I would title it The Emotional Concussion, because I believe you can concuss the brain emotionally just as if you hit your head on a concrete. I firmly believe this to be the case. I don't know exact chemistry, but I think if I decided to go through it, I could find the exact chemistry behind it. I think we can have an emotional concussion. And today, who's happy the last 2 years? Really, I gave a talk on happiness. It's just I get that talk requested to give that talk frequently, and our founding fathers, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal, down with certain inalienable rights. Among these are health, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the only country that I am aware of in the research I did that wants its public to be happy. Are we happy the last 2 years with the lies that kind of get dumped on us? And what happens when you're not happy? It affects your spleen. You know what your spleen does? It produces B lymphocytes. You know what B lymphocytes do? They fight infections. Do you think there's evil behind it? I'm sorry, I'm going off course here.
Wow. Oh my goodness. That's like a
Yeah,
whole other topic. I love that. So true, because look at the rise of infections that we have been having in the last 2.5 years. And you're absolutely right with the isolation. That's a whole other topic there. But you just segued perfectly into my next question I had for you, because I really wanted to talk about the mood disorders that are just so just all around, and so many people are suffering with depression, anxiety, especially lately. The depression rates, the suicide rates have just quadrupled. And then we've just got the regular mood disorders. I say regular because they're getting worse too, but they're more commonplace: ADHD, ADD, those kinds of things. But depression, anxiety, all of these mood disorders, how can, because the brain is so affected by our lifestyle and inflammation, the negative inflammation, how can the Shape Reclaimed program help these mood disorders specifically?
Yeah, I got lucky with Shape. It just ended up helping everything, and it was nothing short of remarkable. The one area in Shape that I realized there was a little bit of weakness was emotional support. I ended up building having a product made called Mood Balance. It's basically holy basil leaf, which is an adaptogen. What that means is it'll cause your body to adapt. So if you're anxious, it brings you down. If you're depressed, it brings you up. It also stabilizes blood sugar. It's also good for what's called the HPA axis, your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. This is how we cope with stress. I also put in there rhodiola. Rhodiola is an herb. It's a Siberian herb, and it gives people energy. I'm not going to get into the technical aspects of why I chose it, but the complaints people always, the general complaints, I just don't feel right. I feel kind of off and depressed. I'm anxious. I don't have any energy. Rhodiola is for energy. And then I put maca in this thing. And I put maca, Peruvian maca, that is harvested at over 11,000 feet, because that's above that, the maca will make the chemical that you need. Now, maca, if you read about it, it's about sexual health and sexual energy. Well, it's an important part. What is one of the things that happens, male or female, with depression and anxiety, is libido goes south. So I put it in there not for the libido support, but just to realize that reproductive energy, that has to do with thoughts. How pregnant are your thoughts? And I look at cell phones, and I truly understand why they're here, and how wonderful they are, but they've taken away curiosity. How fast does a bee fly? Siri, how fast does a bee fly? We don't have to study anymore.
Right.
Siri can give us the answers. It's not allowing our brains to function the way it should. We're no longer curious because Siri can answer, and the bee flies at 30 miles an hour, by the way, because I asked Siri, which is ridiculous. But the brain is such a complex entity, and we do not respect it like we should. We do not exercise our brain anymore. We've gone through our phase where everybody's jogging and all the aerobic and anaerobic and all the different kinds of exercise, but there's never been the emphasis on the brain. And I think its time has come. We have to step back and realize the brain is the key. And we have to realize that there's a difference in us. There are things called neurotransmitters. They transmit nerve impulse. We don't have one nerve from our brain to our toe. We have a bunch of short nerves. There's a gap between those nerves called a synapse, and there has to be a transfer of chemical energy from one end to the other, and that's called a neurotransmitter. And the most prolific is acetylcholine. So let's say you suck at math. Well, you got a problem with acetylcholine because math requires good acetylcholine levels. And that's one of the questions I ask to the kid that's been ADD. How are you at math? well, I used to be good, but now I suck. Well, that's a huge diagnostic entity. And I know acetyl L-carnitine will help support that. That's why people smoke cigarettes, because nicotine is a cholinergic substance. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, it converts to choline, which converts to acetylcholine, which makes you think better. So cigarettes are more addictive than cocaine. So understanding this brain chemistry is very important. But we've got this male-female aspect. Men are governed by a brain chemical called dopamine. There's a joke there, I realize it. And women are governed by a brain chemical called serotonin. So pornography raises dopamine. Driving your car fast raises dopamine. Watching cars drive fast. Fighting raises dopamine. Arguing raises dopamine. When you got a kid that's got ADD, it's a lack of dopamine. When you argue with an ADD kid, they like it. They enjoy it. It's raising their dopamine. They feel better when they argue. We have to understand the chemistry behind that. But here's the thing that's interesting. Protecting others raises dopamine. Now, men are ruled by dopamine. Women are ruled by serotonin. Serotonin is our feel better chemical. That's all these SSRIs, Zoloft, Effexor, like Prozac. These are all selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. But here's the interesting thing. Serving others raises serotonin. Think about the godly nature of that statement. So colonial times, you're sitting on your porch and you're there with your spouse and your two children, and the mother says, "Oh, isn't that deer in the meadow beautiful?" The kids say, "Oh, that deer is so beautiful." And the father looks at it with his dopamine brain, says, "It's beautiful, but I got to kill it. We need the food." So there has to be a difference in our brain, and it's this push to make all of our brains the same that is creating a neurotoxic effect, and it's the main reason why letting our children decide what gender they are. Look, I'm a doctor. Pull down their pants. I'll give you a quick answer. I'm not trying to be snotty, but allowing this kind of activity to occur is absolutely there. I don't even know the word to describe it. It's absolutely absurd. Having litter boxes in schools because some kid identifies as a cat. Well, put it in the middle of the room and say, use it. We have to stop this. We're trying to make everybody homogenous, everybody the same, and it's not the answer to our problem. We have got to respect the fact that we are different and take those differences. Look, I'm conservative, I'm traditional, but I'm respectful of a progressive liberal. I think the two can talk together. I live in northern Wisconsin. And me, back in the day, I'd have been totally against snowmobiles. I don't want that noise and that smell in my woods. And yet the progressive and the liberal says, I get that, but look, nothing happens here in the winter, but this could be really good for the businesses. And they compromised, and now it's a huge industry. And multiple jobs have come because the two groups are able to talk. So I respect a progressive liberal approach. I don't respect our government because they're as far as east is from west. And when one says one thing, the opposite says the opposite. Therein lies the problem. They can't come to some kind of compromise. And that's what we have to do in our brain is we have to understand that we've got these polar opposites that are pulling us literally apart, and we domino into depression, anxiety, suicide, whatever it might be, gender unawareness of what gender we are. Let's get back to understanding the basis behind this, which is brain chemistry, inflammation, dysglycemia, all these things we talked about, which come back to the whole thing. It's all about inflammation in your brain. Let's stop that inflammation and let the brain heal itself, because it can heal. When I was in school in 1970s, if you had a nerve injury, a brain injury, it's done. You're never going to be any better. Well, then all of a sudden they discovered something called neuroplasticity, that the brain can actually regenerate itself. And it's like, well, isn't that interesting? and so all of a sudden the truth became not true. And we now open up the possibility that our brains can, in fact, regenerate. And I believe they can. So for everyone out there that's having problems with their brain, I believe there's something out there that can fix it. Now, what that is very complex, and how to find it. Is it inflammatory? Is it neurotoxic? Is it a lack of nutrition? Is it whatever it might be? Is it a deficiency? Is it an excess? Something's out there that can help it. Wow.
Yeah. I agree. There's always hope. And that's what
Yes.
I always tell my clients. Like, there's always hope. We give up so quickly, and a lot of it is our mindset, for one thing. It's our mindset. And how are we going to progress with that? Are we going to just
Yeah.
roll over and admit
Yep.
defeat, or are we going to keep fighting, and we are going to recognize that, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and
Absolutely.
it is not our creator's intent for us to be sad, sick, and stuck. So
Absolutely. Oh, I like that. I might coin that. I might steal that from you. Sad
you
sick.
could steal it. It's yours. I love your next book title, actually. So
Yeah,
yeah,
you can have
I,
it. 'Cause I'm not writing the book. Yeah.
yeah, I think you need to write
You know,
that.
I
So
have to.
go ahead.
Let me share one quick story. I know you want to squeeze time wise, so cut out something else I said. But so I had this patient. I was a young and brilliant doctor. Now, actually, only one of those adjectives was in fact true. I was young. Um, I had this little lady come to me. Her name was Evelyn, and she was in her 80s, and she had some weakness in her legs, and she didn't drive. She came to my office in a bus, and I take very thorough history and with patients, and I was able to help her. She had some simple problems. I was able to help her condition. But in her history, she wrote in 1964, she had glioblastoma, which is the deadliest form of brain cancer known to man. You're going to die. The survival rate is 0. If you got it, you're going to die. And I said, well, Miss So-and-so, I notice here you put down glioblastoma. And I said, it must be a mistake because here you are in the 1980s, still alive. She said, no, that's what I had. And so I took a little more history. I went back and I said, no, look, you understand, there truly is no survival rate to this thing. I mean, it's a deadly form of cancer. I'm sure you've mistaken. And she says, no, that's what I had. So now I take more history. I go back a third time, and I said, now I go, Evelyn, it's no longer Miss. You need to understand the gravity of the situation. This is an absolutely fatal form of cancer. You obviously did not have this condition, so fess up. Where were you on the night with the light in her face on August? And so I always would describe her as that white gloves after Easter kind of gal. So she had her little white gloves in her hand, and she leaned forward to me and she goes, Sonny. She said, I'm an educated woman. I've been a librarian all my life. And she said, I got the diagnosis. I researched it, I studied it, and she said, I truly understood the gravity of the situation. And she said, I knelt in prayer and woke up the next morning and I decided not to participate in the disease. And she died in her sleep in her 90s and of a fatal form of cancer. And from a young doctor standpoint, I went, whoa, man, what a lesson to learn as a young, brilliant doctor. So hence the brilliant adjective probably wasn't accurate, but I was in fact young. But an absolute power of the human brain to change the course of anything in your life is out there. It can be done. She chose not to participate in the most fatal form of brain cancer known to man and died in her 90s, 30 plus years later.
What
Amazing.
an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that. That is
Yeah,
incredible. And that's hope right there for
that
anybody
is.
listening. That is the epitome of the hope that God has for us. And
Absolutely.
it's all about faith. It's all about faith in our creator, and just partnering with him, partnering with the Lord for whatever ails us, whether it's weight loss, whether it's a horrible
Yeah,
diagnosis. You partner with the Lord, and you don't
absolutely.
agree with it, right? You agree with the Lord. You don't agree with the diagnosis. You don't agree with the fact that you will never be able to change your lifestyle. You'll never be able to lose weight. You'll never, ever, all those voices that are in our head from probably childhood, right? I mean, it
Yeah.
makes such a difference. And that's what I love about not only the shape drops, which we didn't really talk about this time. We had talked about it before on our last interview, but we did talk about the mood balance. And I'm so glad that you did, because there's hope. If you put so many people that are on these SSRIs, it's actually depleting the very thing that it's trying to support, right? Like serotonin,
Seven.
for example.
Yeah.
You're actually depleting your serotonin levels, among other things. It's causing other issues. The mood balance, It's all God-given herbs that God put on this earth for us to use for a purpose.
Absolutely.
Everything that he gave us on this earth is for us to use. It is up to us to figure out how to use it. And you have done that beautifully with the ingredients and the shape drops and in the mood balance. So just all of the adaptogens. So you have just done amazing work with the Shape Reclaimed program. And I'm just so grateful to be able to study under you and help just be a part in my small corner of the world of helping to change lives using these wonderful herbs and lifestyle restorative medicine, essentially.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's, um, you know, in my career, my successes were so much greater than my abilities. And you got to step back at some point and go, how are these things happening? And was it because we held hands as a staff and prayed every day? My staff prayed for me for wisdom. They prayed for the patients for understanding and their ability to make the changes. I think it was a huge factor in the success in my clinic, and it was astounding. A patient would tell me how much better they are, and I'd be the doctor and act like I know what I was doing. I'd walk out of that room and go, "Oh, that is so cool! I can't believe that happened." I should have done it in front of the patient. I'm embarrassed to just say, "Wow, that's amazing." But what can't God do? No,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
look at Christ. He raises Lazarus from the dead. Okay, now look, I understand physiology. The guy's clinically dead. He's decomposing. Okay, I mean, he is rotting flesh. It's going to stink really bad. After 12 hours, it's going to smell bad. After 24 hours, it's going to unbelievable. So he comes out of raising Lazarus from the dead, and he turns around to his disciples. Okay, all right, guys, this is how you do this. You put your left hand to the north. You draw that north energy through, and then you put your ring finger on the temple. And no, he didn't do that. He looks at his disciples, and what does he say? He says, "Greater things than this you can do also." He just raised a guy clinically dead.
Yeah.
It turns to his people and say, "You can do greater things than this." I go, "I'm in. I'm in. If that's part of the program, I'm in. I want to be part of that."
Absolutely. Matthew 6:36, I believe, but seek first the kingdom of God and his
Absolutely.
righteousness, and all of other things will be added unto you. And that's where I think a lot of us Christians miss the boat, right? We have stopped seeking first. We are seeking ourselves first. We're seeking the world's way first, and we need to go back to seeking God first and his righteousness.
There's a line called you can lead a human to knowledge, but you can't make them think." We got to go back to thinking. We got to look. We took away our curiosity. Let's
Yeah.
become curious again.
Yeah.
Let's become curious. So when they made Celebrex and Vioxx, it was a COX-2 inhibitor. My first thought is, what is COX-2? It's a cyclooxygenase enzyme, and it stops the progression into prostaglandin 2, which is inflammatory and immunosuppressive. So the COX-2 inhibitor, the cyclooxygenase enzyme COX-2, is blocked, so we don't trigger the inflammation and the immunosuppression. Well, the problem with those drugs is they also block prostaglandins 1 and 3, which are anti-inflammatory and immunoenhancing. So where you help one area, you shut down two other areas that are anti-inflammatory and immunoenhancing. That's called side effects, by the way. That's why Vioxx didn't have as good a press agent, and it got taken off the market because it caused heart problems. But Celebrex had a better press agent, and it's still on the market. And the same damn drug, excuse me.
Mm,
You
mm.
know, but my curiosity, what is a COX-2 inhibitor? Man, I went and looked it up. Not the
Yeah.
public isn't going to be desirous of that, but it doesn't have to be that intense from a scientific standpoint. But look at it from a generality standpoint, and just ask your heart. Think with your head and your heart. You're going to be a much better human being if you think with your head and your heart. It's that simple. That heart energy, spirituality. Head energy is knowledge. I get that. But knowledge isn't enough. With your heart, you gain wisdom, and with wisdom comes miracles.
Absolutely. And you're right. We have taken away the art of curiosity, and we have replaced it with just taking at face value as truth. No longer researching for ourselves, no longer thinking on our own. Actually, I just read this amazing book, and of course I'm blanking on the title, but it was about that specifically. It's how we have given up all of our rights to think willingly, and the next generation and the generations to come, like if we continue on this path, what is our education going to be like? What is our brain going to be like?
Here's what Siri can't do. It can't come up with a new idea.
Right.
It can't come up with a new idea. I remember I was lecturing somewhere and somebody made a statement to the fact that, well, you're lucky because you caught this and that's the be all and end all. All the good ideas are taken. And I said to him, really? I said, do you realize we walked on the moon before we put wheels on a suitcase? we sent somebody to the moon and they walked on the moon's surface before we put wheels on a suitcase. Come on, people. The good ideas are out there. But don't ask Siri for a new idea because it can't give you one. Only your brain and your curiosity can come up with a new idea.
And who created the brain? Right.
Well,
who created the brain? And so, we have been given these spiritual gifts, and if we are not utilizing them, it's to our detriment. But, also the thing is, as Christians, God will find somebody else to obey him and to use those gifts that he's given.
Absolutely.
So, well, this has been so fun. So fun once again.
End again? Michelle, this is wrong. We shouldn't end.
I know we could talk for another hour for sure, but it has just been such a pleasure. And I just am so grateful for your wisdom and your knowledge and just coming on and talking with me and my listeners. And really, every single human being on earth can benefit from the SHAPE program, whether you are looking for, mind support, mental health, or inflammation control or weight loss. I mean, every single person can benefit from the SHAPE ReClaimed program that you have created.
Thank you for that. It's a very kind thing to say. I'm watching Monk right now because my brother said, you remind me of Monk. And I watch Monk and I go, this guy's kind of OCD and nuts. And I said to my brother, am I OCD and nuts? He said, no. You just won't ever take no for an answer. And Monk says, I could be wrong, but I'm not. So, look, it was dropped into my lap. It became a national company. My wife and I are equally yoked. We take this thing forward, and we're helping people. And it's really what's important. And I talked about this the last time we got together. I had a mentor. He said you're going to go through 3 phases as a professional. The first is survival, and as a young doctor, you survive. You hone your skills, and he said, now the second phase you're going to go through is success. And I remember thinking as a 20-year-old doctor in the audience to this great mentor of mine, what's better than success? And he had that pregnant pause, and he said, you're all thinking, what's better than success? And he says, what's better than success is to be significant. And I've met successful people that were miserable SOBs. I've never met anybody that had significance in his life that was miserable. When you take somebody and through something you did allowed them that they were told they're never going to have a child again, all of a sudden they're pregnant, man, that makes for a good day, and that makes for a good week, a good month, probably a good career. And I've had many of those type of things happen in my career that I am at the point now. I want to teach what my mentor taught. I want to teach people to be significant. Success, I've been rich and I've been poor. I can't say it's better one way or the other. You can do more when you're got money, but am I happier with more money? I don't know. But when you're significant, man, that's some true joy, and that joy comes to the Lord. Happiness is about happenings. Joy is a spiritual depth of elation. It's just amazing. Be significant.
Yeah, and it can come down to, what do you want your legacy to be too?
Absolutely.
And do you want it to have impact? So
Yep.
I think you are definitely doing that. And Again, so grateful to study and learn under you. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I know that I will be asking you to come back again because I just love our conversations.
I'll be ready and willing, my friend.
Good. Well, thank you so much. And I will have all of your contact information listed so that our listeners can find you. But do you have a quick anything else you'd like to say before we close?
Hey, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you, my friend.
Absolutely.